Scene. Jacob, what's going on right now?
Hey, if you guys can see me, what we're seeing are Trump supporters who have left the rally, who are being surrounded by protesters. We've been watching this all night. He just got his hat stolen. Earlier, the sign was stolen. They've been targeting the Trump supporters. It starts like this. They talk about them. They yell at them. Sometimes they take away their hats. And sometimes they fight back. And they continue fighting them. We've seen a couple of actual fights break out. And as you mentioned earlier, we saw one Trump supporter, and this is where it started. We saw one Trump supporter who was hit with several eggs in the face. Other bottles were thrown at her. That's where it started. We're now several blocks away from where the venue where the rally was held is. And as you can probably tell, there isn't a lot of police presence. We've seen in the last half hour a dozen or so officers in front of one hotel, and then a few other officers inside of a patrol vehicle that was just overwhelmed by the number of protesters and had to back up because protesters were hitting the car. So it's not in control, and this we've seen over and over again around the country, that when the rally is over, that when the Trump supporters are leaving and the protesters leave their designated area, and they just sort of find each other, and the police don't seem to be prepared or ready for that, that's when the trouble starts. We're now going inside of a parking garage that belongs, it seems, to the hotel nearby, possibly targeting more Trump supporters, which seems to be what this is all about.
Hey, Jacob, can you give us an idea? I've seen a few Bernie Sanders signs. I've seen some signs that say we want socialism. It does look like an overwhelmingly young crowd. What can you tell us mostly about what the protesters look like to you?
You're right. I would say that this is a mostly young crowd. I would say I see very few folks who look to be older than 30, 35. Some of those who are protesting will say that they are, here we go, they're breaking some of the equipment here. Some of those who are protesting say that they are Bernie Sanders supporters. Others, we ask if they have a candidate, they say there is no candidate. They're just anarchists, they describe themselves as. But mostly a younger crowd, I would say that'd be accurate.
What are they going after in there?
You know what? I didn't see if they were going after a Trump supporter there, but we decided not to follow them inside there. It looks to be most of the protester group, although there are others that are outside here. It's really been almost a witch hunt where they left the area where the police officers were, and then every time they saw a Trump supporter, they would just go at that person, and as I said, there were fights.
I've been noticing that.
We'll show you now the...
I've been noticing it. It's like a beehive with a group going after one particular thing at a time. I didn't know earlier if they were waiting at an entrance for somebody to come out, but as it turns out, it appears that they spotted somebody with Trump gear on, and it's like they gathered around them in a swarm.
It really has. It was really sad to watch. The first Trump supporter, who was a woman, I would say in her late 20s or 30s, who had a Trump jersey on. And now we'll point out that we have, for the first time, a bigger show of officers here. We have a few dozen, including those on motorcycles, that are telling the protesters to leave.
I didn't see those there about 5 minutes ago, Jacob. They must have just arrived.
They did. They just arrived. And as I was talking before about this Trump supporter, this woman who's in her late 20s, early 30s, and she simply had this Trump jersey on, and as soon as a throng of protesters saw her a couple hundred feet away, they all rushed her into a corner. And again, they started to yell at her, they started to taunt her, then they started to throw things at her, including eggs and bottles and other things, and we were very close there. And from then on, that's when the protesters went away from the rally area. They started taking over the streets. And as I mentioned before, we're probably 4 or 5 blocks away from where the venue is.
Is there any sign? Well, it looks like there are more people coming out of the parking garage at this point, now that a few cars have pulled out. Is there any sign that this might be dissipating, or is it actually picking up?
No, I would say there's no sign of this dissipating. Sometimes, a lot of the time, when you see organized protests show up at the rallies, they tend to leave about the time that the rally is wrapping up, and then some are left behind who look like they're looking for trouble, and it's a smaller group. But in this case, as I've mentioned before, there are still hundreds of protesters that stretch all the way down to the next street. Maybe a couple hundred I said 300 before. Maybe that's the case. Over here in the distance, we're going to see they're lighting on fire some Trump merchandise.